Hi everybody, my name is Keisha and welcome to my YouTube channel called Adventures in Infertility with Keisha. So this has been on my heart to do for a really long time. I wanted to, most of the people that know me know that me and my husband have struggled for some years to have children. And we finally started getting in fertility treatments. And I wanted to be able to educate people on different conditions and, just help other people or other couples that are going through the same process. And it's been on my heart for a while to do it. Just the nervousness and being scared of actually telling my story. But a few weeks ago, I saw Michelle Obama on Good Morning America telling her story. So I'm like, okay, it's time. Like you just never know who you can help. So, this is going to be like a series of videos. So, the first video is basically going to be an intro. So, stay tuned. Okay, so first I wanted to kind of tell my story and kind of go over the different conditions that I suffer with and kind of how things led up to us now going through IVF, which is in vitro fertilization. Um, so I'm 28, my husband's 30. We have been married for 3 years. Um, we were trying for kids even before we got married, and we knew something was wrong. So I started going to the doctor or whatever because I have a family history of women starting their periods very early. So I started my period when I was 8 years old, and it's always been rough. But I started having like this sporadic bleeding that would go for weeks to months sometimes. And nobody could ever figure out what it was. Um, so eventually I end up going to see a specialist, and they diagnosed me with something called endometriosis, which that is basically when abnormal tissue grows outside of your uterus. So in 2012, I had surgery to have that removed. Everything was okay for a while. So then I, started gaining a whole bunch of weight, still couldn't get pregnant, um, and end up being diagnosed with diabetes, type 2 diabetes. So end up finding out that I had a condition called PCOS, which stands for polycystic ovarian syndrome. Basically, your ovaries don't work. They have to be stimulated to work through medication, and it causes you to become insulin resistant, which means you develop diabetes. It puts a lot of weight around your midsection. It causes you to grow like abnormal hair, like in places that it shouldn't grow. Like women, we shouldn't have chin hair, stomach hair on your feet, and it causes like a lot of cysts, and it's just really problematic. And some people that get PCOS, they get one or the other end of the spectrum. Either your ovaries work and you can get pregnant, but it's hard to stay pregnant, or either you can't get pregnant at all on it. So it went from having endometriosis removed to PCOS. Um, so then I want to say like maybe 3 or 4 years ago, still couldn't get pregnant. So no, not 3 or 4 years ago. October of 2017. We decided to go ahead and start trying fertility treatments because I was having no success in getting pregnant. And little do people know, me and my husband have been in a relationship for 7 years now, but we've been married for 3 years. Twice I have gotten pregnant, but miscarried very, very early within like the first month. And that was due to me bleeding all the time. I want to say I'm 28 now. So when I was like 25, 26, it was all the time bleeding. I would go for 3 to 4 months with bleeding. It would cause me to be anemic. Um, it was problematic. Like I literally, like my family knows that I have an emergency bag, because I never know, and it still to this day I never know when I'm gonna start bleeding. So um, sometimes it goes for a week, sometimes it'll go for 2 weeks, 3 weeks, stop for maybe a day, and then start back. And the longest if it's ever went was 3 months, and I thought I was dying, like literally. Um, so um, October 2017, we started at Fertility Centers of Illinois, with um, fertility treatments. So when you go through fertility treatments, there's pre-makeup work that you have to do. So basically, you do your consultation. Um, they do like a bunch of um, makeup work before. So they look at your weight, they look at, your genetics, whether you've had people in your family that have reoccurring miscarriages. What's your family history? Do you have a family history of endometriosis? Do you have a family history of PCOS? They look at your weight, basically your health issues. And at the time, still to this day, I'm diabetic. It's not as bad as it was anymore. It's slowly getting better. Hopefully within the next month, I'll be diabetes free because I've been working really hard at it. So we did all the makeup work and stuff. And then they do an ultrasound called the HSG ultrasound, where they go, basically it's like a regular pap smear. But they insert a catheter into your cervix, and it sprays a dye into your fallopian tubes. And if the dye goes through successfully, that means that your tubes are not blocked and they're open. And we all know you need your fallopian tubes to have children. Some people can be successful in not having children. Some people can be successful in having children with just one tube. But ideally, doctors would like you to have 2 tubes. So did all that. My tubes were fine. But we discovered that I have what's called a tilted cervix. Which in the past, I've always had issues with pap smears where they're just completely painful and uncomfortable. And I've had doctors just struggle with finding my cervix. So this doctor was successful in finding my cervix, but it's what's called a tilted cervix, which means that's how I was born, basically. The cervix is in a weird spot other than what it's supposed to be, and it's very, very narrow and hard to find, which that plays a part in when you're having children, because it can prohibit you from birthing children vaginally also. So now we're from the endometriosis, PCOS, and now a tilted cervix. So of course, this gets very discouraging at times. And if you're watching this and you're currently going through this journey, or you've been trying to get pregnant and you have some of these symptoms and you don't know what's going on, it's definitely a race not for the weak. Like, this is a lot to go through, and definitely many times I've questioned my sanity. I felt like I was going crazy. And not a lot of people understand this unless this is something that you're going through, or people that have went through it. One thing I will share that one thing that really resonated with me with going through this process and having all these different emotions, um, not being able to produce children makes you feel like less of a woman. God created women to be able to reproduce. So when you can't do what a woman is built naturally to do, it makes you feel some type of way. And then, I'm surrounded with people that have children, or that get pregnant and stuff easily. And one thing I used to always say, like, why can the women that's not even trying to get pregnant and, you know, can just get pregnant with the snap of a finger, but people that want to have children, it's hard for them. And I'm, like I said, if you're struggling with this, I'm pretty sure you felt that at one point in time. Or people that throw away their babies or, abuse their babies can just pop them out like Skittles. But people that want them and would treat them right and, really desire to be mothers have a hard time conceiving. So I definitely went through all those different emotions. Even to this day, I still go through all those emotions. And that's normal going through this journey. So, like I said, we went from endometriosis, PCOS, to having a tilted cervix. So, getting into fertility treatments in October of 2017, we had our first IUI. They felt like I would be a good candidate for IUI, which is basically insemination. So if any of you've ever heard of the turkey baster method, basically they test your eggs and stuff too. Me being 28, I have a very, very excellent egg count. So that wasn't an issue. But I've always had a hormone imbalance since I was a little girl. Women produce estrogen. You need progesterone to be able to stay pregnant. I do not produce progesterone. It has to be given to me, which is the reason why I don't have stable periods. I don't have regular periods. So I, a lot of times, have to be given progesterone to bring on a period and then stop it in a timely manner, or either stop myself from bleeding. The thing with progesterone is you can only take it so many times because it will start to, cause other things as far as your hormones to go kind of wacky. So with the PCOS actually causes women to produce more testosterone than estrogen, which in testosterone you see that typically in men. So another reason why I couldn't get pregnant, because I was producing more of what men do than what women do. So basically when we were doing the insemination, they had to get like all these hormones regulated. They had to look at my egg count, which was excellent. And we went through at least a month or two of them just trying to balance out hormones. And things had to be stimulated as far as them stimulating my ovaries to actually work. And they get you ready or whatever. Like we have to do this shot called Iberdrill, which basically stimulates ovulation, which is another thing with PCOS. You don't ovulate, or if you do, you never know when you ovulate, because when women have regular periods every 21 or 28 days, you bleed for so many days, and then you ovulate, have sex, and then you miss your next period. With PCOS, because you don't have stable periods, you never know if you're ovulating. And after running a lot of tests, we found out that I just don't ovulate at all. So everything has to be timed with fertility treatment. So, you have to go in, you have to do blood work, you have to do the like the workup. Like you have to do blood work to see where your hormones are. What do they need to do with your hormones? They have to look at egg count, to see if you're even still making eggs that they can trigger. And then my husband has to be tested. You know, you have to be tested for infectious diseases and stuff. Male factor plays a part in it. They have to look at his sperm. They have to look at his sperm count. They have to look at the shape of his sperm to make sure that they're shaped correctly. Can they swim in the direction that they need to go in to fertilize with your egg? So we did all of that. My husband had a little bit of issue with his sperm count, but we got that back up as far as they gave him like fish oil vitamins to take, and that knocked it right up. So got to the day of the insemination, and it was absolutely horrible. Did the Ovidrel shot, which triggered the ovulation the night before, and the insemination was completely painful. That's where the tilted cervix came into play, because they were unable to find my cervix. Which basically we weren't even able to do a legit insemination. So they had to get it as close to the cervix as they could, because they were unable to find it. So that was a failed cycle. And then after that, they make you do a 2-week wait. And then they go in, they test your blood for what's called beta numbers. And anything over 0.5 means that there's a hint of pregnancy. And then that number is supposed to triple every 48 hours. So mine came back at a 3. So, and then just nothing after that. So, of course, I was upset, and I wanted to jump right into IVF, because with IVF, they're quote unquote making the baby for you. So they basically take my husband's sperm, retrieve maybe 3 or 4 of my eggs, depending on how many we're doing. And they basically make them together in a petri dish, and you wait for like maybe 5 days, and it creates an embryo, and then they place that embryo back into you, and it's supposed to attach itself to your uterine wall, and then you just have to hold the baby for 9 months. I wanted to do that initially, but insurance said that we had to try we had to have so many attempts at IUI first. So we were in the middle of our second IUI cycle, and that had to be canceled due to unforeseen stuff, family issues and stuff. I had a death in my family at the time, and it just was a lot going on at that time. So we kind of quit with the fertility stuff for a minute, but in the meantime, that bleeding was still going on heavily. So I ended up trying to resume this year in like May. So we switched fertility doctors. I went in for a consultation. They wanted to do like an ultrasound and stuff. And I came back. The ultrasound showed that I had a condition called adenomyosis. I have to kind of pronounce this well because it's hard to pronounce. Adenomyosis is where like your endometrial tissue grows outside the uterine wall. So it's like the sister disease of endometriosis. So basically, the endometriosis had came back, so I was dealing with that too, and the adenomyosis. There is no cure for adenomyosis. It just gets worse over time. And at that point, I was bleeding for weeks at a time. And they started suggesting, like, okay, basically my uterus looked horrible from the years of prolonged bleeding, and just it was getting more now frequently with the bleeding. Like I was going maybe a few weeks, and then a long bleed, and then maybe getting a few days of a break, and then having prolonged bleeding with that too. So that's when they started bringing up a hysterectomy. And I'm like, no, I'm 28. Like, it's it's not time for me to have a hysterectomy yet. But there's no cure for adenomyosis. So basically, they're like, well, we think you'll be a good candidate for IVF, since with the adenomyosis, they didn't think that was a good idea to continue with the inseminations. And then the fact that the tilted cervix made it impossible to almost find my cervix. They just didn't think I would be a good candidate for that anymore. And that was just a matter of them wording it a certain way to my insurance company, like, no, this is not going to work for her. Her only option is IVF at this point. So, but that particular doctor, I really didn't like, because they, I'm a heavy set girl. So they wanted me to lose like so much weight, beforehand. And then they wanted me to completely be diabetes free, which, excuse me. But they wanted me to be, completely diabetes free or whatever. And yes, diabetes can really affect, pregnancy. Like, it can cause miscarriages. It can cause your baby to be born with deformities. It can put a lot of, pressure on the mother as far as, me even staying alive to be able to carry the baby. So I got that, but it's just they just was like, well, come back when you're done with all of that. So left that situation alone, and we just was like, okay, we need to revisit this another time. So, that was in like May or June of this year. So, we kind of took a break from it again, and then the bleeding got even worse again. So, kept seeing my OBGYN and stuff. He's like, Keisha, you're to the point, you need to have a hysterectomy. Like, you either need to go full-fledged into fertility treatments and hurry up and do IVF to see, if they can get you pregnant quick enough, or you need to go ahead and have a hysterectomy, because this is just like really, this is, your uterus can't take too much more. So they put me on the medicine that I spoke about earlier, progesterone, for I think like a total of 5 months, because that's like the longest you can be on it. So did that, and that only works for maybe like 2 or 3 months or whatever, and the bleeding started again. So I'm like, okay, yeah, this is, I don't know what to do at this point. So we started with a new fertility doctor, in, I want to say the last of October. This doctor I really like, because he covered all bases of everything. So he's like, yes, I think you'll be a good candidate for the IVF. I agree with the adenomyosis. I agree with the endometriosis. I agree with the PCOS, but we're going to work with you all around, with everything. So I'm connected with their weight loss doctor, down 12 pounds since I've been working with them. I'm connected with a diabetes doctor with them, and while going through the process of IVF. So we're still, trying to troubleshooting the hormones, still trying to get the hormones together and stuff. And, I feel like we're actually, doing this now. It's not just, oh, come back when this is fixed or whatever. Like, they're working all around with everything. So, we are currently in the process of doing that. Yes, there's still some challenges. anybody that's struggling with this, especially if you're married, it takes a toll on the marriage. Um, Mentally, it's a lot to go through. Like I said, some days I feel like I'm losing my mind. And I have my moments where I'm sad, I'm happy. I'm like, oh, I have all the faith in the world. Like, okay, God, it's my time. And then, bam, something will happen again, where whether it's the bleeding again, or hormones go wacky again, and then I feel like we've taken 5 steps back. Um, so and even like with my husband, like I never really considered how this made him feel, and that's a lot on a man that, like, oh, I want to be a father, and why can't we be like everybody else and have a family? Why does it take all of this to have a family? And then especially like when I go into my things where I'm bleeding severely, um, it's he be scared I'm gonna die. Like, it's been a few times where I've came close to having a blood transfusion because it's been that bad, or I've had to spend the night in the emergency room because it's that bad. So it definitely, it takes a toll, and when you're going through this process, they feed you a lot of hormones. So half of the time, I don't want to be bothered with anybody. Like my attitudes are night and day. I have my days where I'm full of energy, and then I have my other days like I don't want to talk to nobody. I don't want nobody looking at me the wrong way. Like my mood shifts constantly with this, and my husband gets the brunt end of it because he's with me all the time. So it has definitely put a strain on our marriage at times. Um, and but you know, if I believe it's meant for us to have children, so for whatever reason, it's taking all of this and it's taking this long. God has a plan for everyone, so I try to keep that in mind when I have my bad days, or I get a phone call or a text from a friend like, oh, I'm pregnant, and you just told me a few days ago you weren't even ready to have children, but you're pregnant and wasn't even trying. So I definitely try to keep a positive mind about my situation and stuff, and you know it's a emotional roller coaster, um, especially when you going through all these different doctors, and all these doctors have different opinions on stuff, and that can be really frustrating sometimes. Like, okay, this doctor thinks it's this doctor thinks it's this doctor, it's like, okay, what is it? Like, can you guys just figure out what's going on with me? um and it's just, it's a lot to deal with at times. But I will say, over the years of me going through this, I will say that a lot of women have like reached out to me and want to know stuff about this, or I'm experiencing this, I'm experiencing that, and can you help me with this, can you help me with that? And that gives me therapy. That's my therapy through my situation, is to be able to help someone else through their journey, and be able to talk to them about what's going on with them as far as concerning having children and stuff. And that brings me peace about my own situation. So, I think when people go through things like this, their life becomes a testimony, and you just never know how God is going to use someone. Um, so, I just, like I said, this is going to be a whole series, and I just wanted to give you guys like some background. I know I'm like jumping everywhere, so definitely, like, if you have some suggestions on what you want me to talk about concerning this, because I have been through it all with this, or if you you know, have some pointers, like, oh, Keisha, I think you should do this. I think you should do, like, definitely let me know, so I can definitely improve on this, because I want this series to be able to help someone through their situation concerning fertility and stuff. And, you know, I just wanted this to be an intro. You know, I just wanted to go over some of the conditions that I've suffered through and still suffering through, and kind of where we are now, as far as going through the IVF. I won't get all the way into what that process has been until maybe like my next video, and kind of go over, you know, like the inseminations and stuff, like how get more into how that works, and stuff. But, you know, I know a lot of women go through PCOS, endometriosis, adenomyosis, and don't really know what it is or don't have an explanation of what it is. So I know sometimes it does help for somebody else to share what they've been through, and they're like, oh, I have the same thing. Even with, I've had to deal with fibroids. Fibroids cause a lot of severe bleeding, and sometimes can be confused with adenomyosis. But, you know, if you have a good doctor, and ultrasounds show fibroids, and fibroids are just, for the most part, non-cancerous tumors that can be on the ovaries, it can be on the uterine walls, and they can grow very large in size. Sometimes they can grow so big to where they have to be removed, or sometimes they can grow so big to where, like, if you're really, really small and you can have like a big belly and people are like, oh, she's pregnant. No, she has fibroids. So yeah, I've definitely had to deal with that before, and they're not nice because they hurt and they cause a lot of bleeding. So like I said, I just wanted to go over a few, like an intro to basically my situation, and hopefully this can help someone out there that's currently going through the same situation. Like I said, if you have any questions for me, definitely ask. If you have any suggestions or anything you want to ask me that you want me to talk about, definitely do that. And like I said, this is going to be a series, so I will definitely stay tuned as I give you guys more updates. And like I said, welcome to my YouTube channel, Adventures in Infertility with Keisha. Thank you guys for listening, and have a blessed night, and Happy New Year. Bye.